All right, now, let's do some fan questions.
Hey, what's up, Uncle Chael? This is Matt from Las Vegas. I'm just kind of wondering what it's like when you start out from like a low-level promotion or like your first promotion, then head up to bigger promotions like Bellator, UFC. What's it like your first time fighting on like national television? I just saw your interview with Ariel about fighting on Fox, and that's something I never really thought about. But yeah, would just love to know what were your first feelings being on TV as a fighter? Thanks.
Fighting in the bigger promotions, I will tell you, and I've heard other guys say this, Jens Pulver talked about this, but for the first time ever, and you bring up Bellator and UFC, and I think those are great examples, but for the first time ever in your career, when you get into one of those promotions, they will make you feel good. They will make you feel wanted. And that's not something that you'll have generally on the lower promotions. And generally it's because you aren't. The shoe really is on the other foot. If you're trying to break into the business, you're trying to break into the sport. I mean, it's a very hard thing to do. To find contact info of a promoter, and then you've got to find a show, and then you've got to find a weight class, and then in certain jurisdictions you have to get licensed, including for amateur contests. There's just so many things that have to happen, and then you got to have an opponent, and you need your opponent to do all of the right stuff, and you need your opponent to show up. Then once all of that happens, you need to go out, you need to have a good performance, hope that somebody saw it, and parlay that into another match. To a record of some level, and then try to take that and get some kind of national and international exposure. It's just a very hard thing to do. And for the most part, you are grateful to anybody who will take a risk on you and give you space inside of a ring in front of an audience, in front of cameras. I mean, you just are really, really thankful for that. So once you get to one of the bigger promotions, whether they need to do it or not, they just do. They make you feel good. They will let you know that, you've made it and your participation is wanted. And I think if you're asking me, how does it feel? That's the main difference. You will feel as though, okay, I am now bringing a commodity. I am now bringing something that can be of value to an organization, as opposed to the organization being of value to me.
Chael, I've got a question for you. In other sports like basketball or soccer, we got athletes reaching their prime age, and that's usually around 27 to 33 years old. Do you think there's such thing as a common prime age for MMA fighters? Because we definitely have some fighters that are kind of in their prime when they're 40, like DC, or we got someone like Jose Aldo, who was best when he was under 30 years old. So what do you think about prime age in MMA? Thanks.
Well, I can tell you that you're going to have some prime years. Now, so many people are happy to equate that to just the physical element of sport. A guy's speed, a guy's strength, a guy's flexibility, reactions. I'm throwing some buzzwords out there, but the physicality of it. When the reality that most athletes know, they just never take the time to share, is it's not a real physical prime as much as it is your mental prime. When was I my most motivated? Then I have to have that align with when could I get my most opportunities? Then if I can get that to align with the physicality aspect, then you can have some really great moments. But for the most part, athletes mentally go through an exhaustion at certain parts. You'll see it all the way down to more youthful. High school, for example. Once they come out of high school, no matter what kind of a blue chip recruit they were, they do have to re-ask and reinvent themselves before they can go to the next level, which would be college. That can just be a very hard thing to do. You go from being a big fish in a small pond to the small fish in a big pond. And do you want to reclaim that mountain? Is that something that you're still mentally motivated to do? And if the answer is no, then you're going to be one of these guys whose peers are going to look back and go, well, he really peaked out in high school and that was his prime. They would be right to say that. That will be your prime if mentally you don't want to put the work in anymore. Now, the larger viewing audience is always going to observe that and think that physically something has changed, when that's the least of your concerns. When were you your most motivated? When did you have your opportunity? And when physically was your body at its best? When those three can come together, even though people like to isolate and only look at the physical, you have to have the other two in place as well. And I can tell you, while I couldn't necessarily state the prime age in a general statement for MMA athletes, I can tell you that athletes as a whole are certainly performing longer later. We are seeing that all the way down to the Olympic level, where people that are 40 years old are now making Olympic teams. I can remember when I was a kid, 1992, America had an Olympian named Chris Campbell, and he was 36 years old, going into the Barcelona, Spain Olympic Games in 1992. At 36 years old, all of Team USA referred to Chris Campbell as Grandpa. He looked ridiculous. He looked old as could be. He ended up getting a medal. He was absolutely great. But at that time, a 36-year-old trying to make an Olympic team, let alone succeeding, let alone getting a medal, this was like front page worthy Sports Illustrated type news. It was just that uncommon. Now you're seeing all sorts of Olympians, 38, 39, 40, 42, from all sorts of different countries. We are seeing athletes be able to go longer. People always equate that to medicine and vitamins and training. They always come back to the physical elements. When the athletes themselves know the truth, it's not physical. It's mentally what years and what times was I motivated.
Hey Chael, this is Aiden from Portland, Maine. I had a quick question about Dominic Cruz. Corey Sandhagen just called out Dominic Cruz for a fight in March as a replacement fight for the fight that was supposed to happen between Corey and Frankie Edgar. I think that's logical, and I think that's most likely what's going to happen. But I was also thinking, with Uriah Faber coming off of a loss and Dominic Cruz coming off of a long layoff, is it possible to sell a fourth fight between Dominic Cruz and Uriah Faber? I think it would make a lot of money. I would like to see it. But we never see fourth fights in MMA between two fighters. And I would like to know your thoughts on why that is, why we never see fourth fights. And I would like to know your thoughts on what you think should be next for Dominic Cruz, and should they make the fight between him and Faber? Thank you.
Well, I like the theme of where you're going with that. I don't have any problem with either one of those pairings. So you're talking about Sandhagen versus Dominic Cruz. That's a great fight, and it does appear that Dominic Cruz is going to be left with, what do I do? I need some kind of a dance partner, particularly if this match with Henry Cejudo doesn't surface. I mean, Henry had that going. Dominic responded. It seemed like everything was hot and bothered about that, and then it kind of cooled down. And I'm trying to remember what happened. If Dominic had like an injury he had to nurse, or I remember Cejudo had something with his shoulder. I think both guys got delayed a little bit, and it does seem that the interest in that does seem to have died off just a little bit. Now, if they want to get that back going, possibly that's where Dominic grows. But if we're taking this from the standpoint that Dominic and Cejudo don't get together, what does Dominic do? Sandhagen sounds just fine to me. And when you bring up the Uriah fight, you think you had asked why we don't see 4 fights in MMA. And I will just tell you, we don't really see 4 fights anywhere. And while that has happened in boxing, I mean, we could go look at Marquez, and we could go look at Pacquiao, that, they fought 4 times regardless of the outcomes or how it went back and forth. There are times when that happens, but in MMA, I mean, for the most part, even a rematch is very uncommon. As we're looking forward to the heavyweight division being settled, that's going to be a true trilogy between Stipe and Cormier, which is very rare. Where you fought twice and you split them, and now you got to go to the rubber match to get this whole, best of 3 things figured out. So there's just not a whole lot of time ever in combat. It does happen, but there's not a whole lot of time where you ever see a 4th fight.
Hey Chael, 2 quick questions. In MMA they always say every round starts standing up, but should that always be the case? Like in places like IBJJF? If guys roll off the mat, the referee would physically drag them to the middle of the mat to assume the same position. What if that happens in MMA? Guys like Maia, in his fight with Masvidal, he ended several rounds on Masvidal's back actually. What if the next round started with him, the referee would put Maia on Masvidal's back again, for Maia to obviously work his grappling game from there? Obviously would favor grappling, wrestling more.
Well, I think I understand your concept here. And I mean, first off, yes, you've got to bring these guys up. And let me just remind you, they used to not. They used to not even have rounds. And it was painfully boring. I mean, if somebody went to the ground and there wasn't advancements and there wasn't guys looking for damage and looking to finish or looking to improve, it was painful to watch. So one of the things that the round did is it just allowed us a fresh start, a fresh coat of paint, and a new look at guys. Now, within a round, I just want to make sure you're clear on this rule. Within a round, let's say 2 athletes are on the ground. Some kind of a foul takes place, or the referee needs to look at one of the athletes and he breaks the action, the referee will return them within that same round to that same position and then restart the contest. I hear what you're saying about the Maia example, where if Maia is in one of his better positions, he's got somebody's back, the time runs out, that he should be able to be given back that same position. But I think if that was ever put into practice, I don't know that you would actually enjoy that as a viewer. And I don't know that your enjoyment as a viewer should trump the sport itself, but I do think that they go hand in hand, even though people don't like to talk about that. The viewer and what the viewer wants to see is a large reason of why the sport exists and why the sport is able to thrive. And I don't suggest for you that it's all the perfect scenario, but this is the way that the game is played. And if we are going to judge each round on a 10-9 must system, meaning that it's just confined to that 5-minute period, nothing that had happened prior and nothing that happens later, and we turn in either a 10 or a 9 for one of each guy, we've got to start them in a neutral position. We can't start them looking at what happened in a frame earlier and then giving an advantage or a disadvantage to either guy.
Hey, Uncle Chael. This is Nolan out in Dallas. I've got a two-part question for you here, or sort of two questions, but both have to do with judges or judging in the UFC. So bear with me, as I think you'll enjoy speaking on both of these. So part one, what's the actual mechanism of the judges' scorecards in the UFC? And what I mean is, are they making a tick mark for every takedown? Are they clicking a thing for every significant strike? And is it sort of uniform across the UFC venues, or is it unique to every judge? I've seen 1,000 UFC fights, but I've never seen one judge's scorecard. I just hear the 29-28, 30-27, and that's it. So I'm wondering if you've seen some of those judges' scorecards, or you know sort of how they're getting it done. Part two, the actual judges themselves. So it doesn't matter who you listen to. It can be some of your own stuff, Rogan, Schaub, Michael Bisping. At some point, everyone talks about controversial judge's decision. It's easy to say, you know, knock them out, don't leave it to the judges. That's how you get your win. But when you're dealing with the best fighters in the world, that's not always going to happen. So the part two would be, going into 2020, is there any behind the scenes or in the shadows talk that you're actually hearing that you could maybe share with us regarding changes towards that? Whether it be the favorite of hiring former fighters to be judges, or just coming together and creating a whole new system for judging the fights. That way, these guys aren't sort of getting robbed on their paydays. Thanks for the content, Uncle Chael. I hope you keep it up, and thank you for your time.
Okay, so when you're asking if I've ever seen a judge's scorecard, yes, I have. And if you ever saw one, you would not be impressed in terms of this. The way you were asking the question, you were asking like if there was a marks and if there was tallies and this goes in a takedown column or this goes in a strike column. A judge's scorecard is completely blank. It just has each athlete's name on it. And at the end of each round, he will just mark 10-9 and then sign the bottom of it. One guy gets 10 points, one guy gets 9. 10-9 must system, and it can go as long. It could go to 8. You could have a 10-8 round, but that's it. A 10 will go in one column, a 9 or an 8, right? The other score will go in that column, and the judge will sign it and turn it in to the executive director. So you won't learn a whole lot by looking at the judge's scorecard, but I can still answer the question for you that no, that is unique to each judge. It is a very subjective scoring process. And each judge, based on his own experience, based on his vantage point, based on however he's feeling at the time, I mean, if you want to get right down to the letter of it, is wide open to mark a 10 and a 9 and sign the bottom of it. If he can't justify why he gave a 10 and why he gave a 9 in the back after the event to his executive director, he may lose an assignment, but that is the checks and balances. It's really as straightforward as that. I don't know that you'd want that to change. I really feel in MMA judgings, the brilliance is in the simplicity. I strongly disagree with other people who are coming in and making statements to overhaul judging. I strongly disagree with it. I love how wide open it is. I love that if two judges see it different, and the executive director drags them in the back after and says, tell me why you did this, and turns to tell me why you did this, as long as they have good, justifiable answers, we all move on. I respect that tremendously, and I will tell you, there's a part of me, and I do get the logic of it. It's very simple. It's a simpleton's math, But to say that somebody who has done the sport, trained the sport, or participated in the sport is the only person that should be able to judge the sport, I get where that makes sense on first glance. I resist it because I'm then also met with a narrative by so many people that say that we want to be treated like other sports. We want to be treated like football and basketball and baseball, but yet you've never required that any referee or any umpire in any other mainstream sport had trained in or participated in that sport. We've never required that an umpire for Major League Baseball had played in the major leagues. We don't even require that he had played Little League. Why can we not trust that he can be an expert in the field in his own regard? I was trained by a man named Roy Pittman. Roy Pittman has put an Olympian or an Olympic alternate on every single team since 1980. Including 2016, he has had an Olympian or an Olympic alternate on every wrestling team that we've had since 1980. Roy Pittman has never wrestled a match in his life. So to tell me that somebody has to do something to be an expert in something or just to be an honest and objective observer, I just think that that argument on its face is weak.